messages, and that was like the first phase, and now people are trying to get into real-time communication, and that's why I think the group voice chat is probably a stronger application to be developed.
And of course, from the Plaxo perspective, since our spin on it comes from the heritage of address books, this makes a ton of sense, of course, because an address book is absolutely useless for anything really other than facilitating ongoing communication. So even before we launched Pulse, we were doing things like in the online version of the Plaxo address book and in Outlook, we put a click-to-call functionality, which was done through a partnership with Jaja. And having that notion of presence within these tools. You know, essentially when we talk about a world in which the data is portable and the services are interoperable, you end up with great utility because I connect with you on one network, and on that network maybe there's only a unique identifier of an email address, but by virtue of us being connected in Plaxo as well, and you having populated your contact info, I get it automatically. So I'm running late for a lunch meeting with you, I pull out my mobile phone, and even though I never entered any of the data myself, I've got your mobile number there and can, you know, initiate a call with a single click.
And what's interesting is you all sort of touch upon it, but it seems like, you know, you have a social network built into your phone. And in many ways, the social graph that's associated with it is the fact that I call somebody and that person calls me back, and I call them 3 times a day versus somebody I never call. And so all this types of information, if you think about data portability and this munging together of all that data into one place is key. We just have a couple minutes left. I just want to see if there are any other questions from the audience. How many of you? Okay. One last thing. How long is it going to take for this federation to happen, and then we'll close up? I mean, what are the biggest obstacles you see, and how long is it going to take? Because what cracks me up is that the OpenSocial spec is on 0.8. It's not even a 1.0 spec, and so you guys are all building applications on top of the spec that's being developed.
We'll let you address that.
I want to answer this one. So, okay, Google and actually our partners are very engineering oriented. We're not very good at marketing. If this spec was driven by marketing, the January 0.7 spec would have been called 1.0 instead of 0.7. But okay, it's called 0.7. It doesn't. The number doesn't mean much. 0.7 is the version that went in production and that is accessed by 275 million users right now. So don't read too much in the number itself. Now, in terms of going to the federation, I think that there's still some work to be done. OpenSocial is really the application model. With FriendConnect, we started meshing 3 different standards: OpenID for identity, OAuth for accessing the API, and then OpenSocial for the programming model. The missing piece, I think, is some privacy APIs. So there needs to be some work in this area. I don't know, the market seems to be moving very fast. Recently, Google introduced FriendConnect, and you can play with it. But Facebook and MySpace both have announced some kind of federation technology called Facebook Connect and data availability, which are along the same lines, as I understand it. They haven't pushed any details about it, but it seems to be the same kind of idea. I expect there will be a lot of action in the next year, and then we'll see how this hashes out.
So how long? I'm going to pin you down here. How long do you think it's going to take?
Wow, that's a tough one to answer. Yeah. I really have no clue. It's a very dynamic market. Everybody's got their ideas about how it's going to work. No, really, I have no clue. I'm pretty sure in a year we'll have made a lot of progress towards that. The REST API are going to help as well, because now you can use that stuff on mobile. You can start using it on other websites. So there's also another interesting project by Chris Messina called DSO, which is about distributed social networks. And I expect this guy is going to push for more openness and federation. But frankly, guessing a time right now, I have no clue.
All right, I'm willing to go on the record. So I have a prediction that I made in December. I did it publicly, and so I'm sticking with it, which is it's not the sort of thing that will play out over 2, 3, or 5 years. It will play out this year. Wow. This year, everything will change. And the reason for that is that the technical building blocks, almost all of them exist, and all of the big players are actually aligned around going toward the end state And realizing what the end state is, they're now racing to out-open each other. And so you see, unfortunately, a sort of rush to get press releases out the door, but behind the press releases is real intent. Quite frankly, I suspect that some people got wind of Google Friend Connect and said, let's pre-announce some stuff that we were about to announce at a developer conference, say in July. But really, if you look at the pieces you need to have in place, you need to have OpenID, you need OAuth, and you need a way to connect that to some RESTful APIs for address book and friends list information. And there's some interesting developments in that third bucket, which we won't dive into the details right now. But essentially, if those three are linked together and we can get some smart user-ready implementations out in the marketplace where the user doesn't have to know anything about any of those technologies, all of that is absolutely feasible in the second half of this year.
Anil?
Yeah, so as I think the two panelists mentioned, the technology blocks are there. What's not there is what John just might have touched on in the end is the user experience. So what is it that the user actually sees? What are those flows going to be? Do they really understand what's going on behind the scenes? And that's not been nailed. And I think there are going to be maybe 3 or 4 attempts at it, and probably there'll be a convergence. But that'll happen next year.
Yeah, I would agree. It's technology is coming together, but we're talking about companies that have valuable businesses and a lot of people that want to access those user bases. It's going to take a little time to figure out and prioritize and then design, develop, build, test, and get it better over time before you start realizing some of the great promise that, by the way, this brings to the web, to the social web. So it's a matter of time, but I think we'll see more things happening next year versus significant progress this year in some of these compelling new applications.
Yeah. Just my final editorial comment. Thank you first of all, those thank you for being very specific about that. I think the takeaway for you is that this is happening right now. Again, those standards are being written, and you as owners of identification, of ID, of mobile phone numbers, of email addresses, and also because so much of the communication layer does happen through you, and that ability to map out that social graph happens through the communications, you need to be involved in these conversations. Because otherwise you won't be involved and your interests won't necessarily be represented. So with that, good luck with that. Thank you again to all the panelists.